What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Goose Knob Show. Today we are going to be talking about the future of tech, but also the future of how people interact with art and culture in general. And you might think, oh, this is really abstract, high level, but it's like this directly affects you and it directly affects, I guess, the direction of society. So, one thing we've taken for granted for several decades was, I guess, the propagation of culture. And how does culture, continue? How do people adopt popular culture and, start practicing it or whatnot? And what's in culture, right? Culture is the music you listen to, the fashion you wear, the way you speak, So there's a lot of tiny elements to it, and it becomes invisible to you because it's something that you just live through. But at least in the West, the way that we have, propagated our culture, that's happened through centralized means. One example is radio stations. So for a long time, I would just listen to Spotify or kind of other things like that. And I would let the algorithm, find music for me. But then I kind of started listening to the radio more. And a lot of songs just suck. They're terrible and stupid. But, if you find a good radio station, then it helps expand your, musical palette, and you learn, songs that you wouldn't have heard if you, weren't listening to the radio. So it expands your horizons. But that's how music was propagated for a lot of, the 20th century and 21st century, up until recently. But what does that mean, right? That means you have, a network of these radio towers that are paid by record companies and kind of other, elements of the music industry to promote specific songs. Hey, this guy, we want this person and this person and this person to have their music go out there. So some central organization is forcing culture on people. And if you start listening to radio, you'll notice this. They play like the same 3 songs over and over and over and over again. And it's like, and a lot of these songs are not good at all. A lot of these songs have really most of the songs have really bad messages, are not good, and blah, 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 whatever. They suck. But you'll notice that they keep artificially astroturfing songs. And that's how, you go back, it's always been like this on the radio, right? Which is why I think a lot of, music artists talk about the music industry and how there's a darker side. And the darker side of the music industry just comes from the fact that, who's choosing which songs to play, right? There's a finite number of, radio frequencies you can transmit under. There's a finite number of stations. There's a finite number of radio towers. And there's only a certain number of time slots to play your music. So the choice of how to fill that has to come from somewhere. And the music industry has a way of doing that. So if you're thinking about like a music executive, let's say they want to figure out, okay, whose songs are we gonna blow up? Right? Who's gonna be the big star this month? Right? Do they want, the best songs? Like, maybe. Or do they want the person who's the most loyal, who is going to, parrot out their message, whatever that message may be? Probably the person who's working in the interests of the music company, ideologically or whatever, not necessarily who's the best. Now, this same phenomenon has happened probably in every industry, in film, TV shows, art, modern art, blah, 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 where, the central authorities that have the means of production or the means of distribution, right? The people who market the songs or the artworks or whatever, the people who publish books and newspapers and whatever, all these central organizations have a choice of who they're actually going to pay to make their content or whatnot. And what we've seen, especially over the last decades, is a fall from meritocracy. The best song gets chosen, the best movie gets made, down to, the most political, or the one that pushes our interests, or, with music, it's a lot more insidious. It's like, we want you to push a specific insidious idea, right? Like, there's like, and you could say, oh, you're paranoid. It's like, bro, just like, what are songs? They have theme. Every song, every piece of art has a theme. And what is a theme? It's a take on life. It's a reaction to the world, right? It's not a conspiracy theory to say that. It's also common knowledge that, especially in the modern day, certain interests have bought up a lot of radio stations. Look it up. Why are they buying up radio stations? It's a very effective means of promoting ideas, right? I think pure art is where your theme kind of comes from your soul. Your theme is that you imbue in the art is something that naturally emerges, right? It's a genuine exploration of the world for the pursuit of truth or beauty or goodness. But propaganda is where you have a preconceived ideological notion that you want to embed in it, and you take the vehicle of aesthetics and you use that to kind of push an idea. Now, it's very subtle. I'd say that, some art can be kind of towing the line. But I don't know. At the end of the day, it would make sense for someone who wants to push interests to leverage art to push those interests. And I would say that that's the direction we've seen. Here's a concrete example of why someone would want to do that. Would you rather have a bunch of fragmented households, right? Where, well, actually, let's go to the opposite. The normal state of things is you have a 2-parent household with a bunch of kids, and yeah, bunch of kids, they have a bunch of kids. Well, yeah, no, large families, right? So let's say 6+ kids, something like that, all under the same roof. I don't know, living a a normal life, right? Normal for most of human history. You have that option. But then what's the other option? You fragment that, right? So you make it so that you want people to divorce more. So now the man and the woman have two different households, so two different rental incomes, two different laborers, right? So they're both working a job, right? So that's producing, double the productive output per family unit. Now, you have a bunch of kids, right? Why would having a bunch of kids not help the economy? Because all of the money that these people make goes to their kids instead of going into the economy. Like, you have to understand how banking works today. Fractional reserve banking, that's just a little aside. Fractional reserve banking basically operates like this. I give the bank money, and for me, I'm thinking, okay, the bank now has $1,000 of my money, and I can, take it back whenever I want. But it just makes it more, it's convenient for me for them to hold on to the money. But the bank now has the money. And the bank is playing a tricky game. As soon as they get that $1,000, they loan it to somebody else. And they don't have the money anymore. It's not there, right? So if I were to go back and ask them for the money, they'd be like, "Oh, I don't have it." But by doing that, they can get more money back, because they're charging interest. And the idea there is that banking system produces more GDP because, the $1,000 I'm putting in produces like another $1,000 because someone else has it. And then that stimulates the economy because more people are spending, blah, blah, blah. Problem is the side effect of that is inflation, but that's a different story. But that's how a lot of our economy works, right? It's not really operating on something, grounded and real. It's kind of tricking the existing systems to kind of maximize our output at the expense of everything else. But going back to the original point. So, two households, two income streams, two laborers producing, double the productive output. Less kids. Why do you want less kids or no kids? Because each person is going to be spending all of their money on consumer goods. What do consumer goods do? They boost up the economy. Why do our banks want, why do they promote fractional reserve lending and all these kind of weird monetary policy things? It's because they want to boost consumer spending. What is consumer spending? Consumer spending is basically, what the GDP is, right? Are people spending money on goods produced by companies and factories and blah, 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 blah. So basically, our entire economy is trying to maximize one variable, GDP. That's the only thing that matters. So how do you do that? You do everything I mentioned, right? You are increasing the GDP at the expense of everything, right? With no regard for externalities. So, anyway, that's kind of just like a brief overview of why certain interests would want to promote interesting values. Like, oh, you don't need a man. Oh, your man, he's not good enough for you. Oh, you guys should break up. You guys should break up, and you know what? You're a strong, independent, blah, 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 blah. Because it just, why would they want to do that? Because it makes the GDP go up. But then what happens? The suicide rates go and skyrocket. Depression rates skyrocket. People are on antidepressants. People hate their lives. Children grow up with fractured families and develop weird personality disorders and blah, blah. Like, I mean, everyone knows how bad things are socially. I mean, it sucks. But you have to understand, it doesn't need to be like this. It does not need to be like this. And a lot of what's being imposed on us is being imposed on us. It's something that is artificial, is astroturfed. But anyway, point is, central sources of culture, like radio stations, film studios, blah, 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 whatever. Central nodes of culture are incentivized by people who want the GDP to go up to promote weird and stupid things. Now a lot of these people are billionaires. Like, I mean, this is cliche, but Soros is one example. But like, why would a billionaire want to do this? Now, a lot of people who theorize about this like to moralize and like to say, oh, this is because they're evil and hate humanity, which might be the case. But I think it's better to kind of look at, imagine they're purely rational people. Like, okay, what do they want? What is the outcome they want? Assuming that it's, has a semblance of being good. One. Why would they be, or how would they get to that outcome that they want? So it's just like an exercise in empathy, right? Why does a billionaire have $1 billion? Because the supercomputer of the economy said, wow, you're very efficient at allocating capital, right? You can produce crazy things, like Elon Musk. Like, he revolutionized the rocket industry. So the economy gave him a couple $1 billion, right? And you could say, well, no, billionaires steal. It's like, okay, go back to your coloring book, okay? The big boys are talking. But like, the economy chose billionaires for a reason, because they're good at allocating capital. You don't make $1 billion because I got rich and then I'm sitting on it. It's because you're spending money in the economy. You are a node in a supercomputer that is very good at producing more capital. So anyway, billionaires got their money because the economy said you're good at allocating capital. So what does that mean? What does that say about billionaires? It means that they probably care a lot about the macroeconomy. They probably care a lot about GDP. They probably care a lot about, on the whole, how do we make our markets better in some way? So, a lot of these billionaires are probably incentivized to pull any lever they can to increase the GDP, because that's something they care about. Maybe even at the expense of morality. Which is why, it would make sense for them to push weird social agendas across cultural nexuses. So, anyway, the point with that was, a lot of people are seeing this. A lot of people see that our central nodes of culture are corrupt, are to a large extent aesthetically bankrupt, and finally just not enjoyable. It's stale, right? They keep repeating the same film over and over and over. It's a, what do you call it? It's a prequel or it's a sequel, or it's blah, 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 blah. Like they keep our current system. It's so corporatized. It's so, how would you say it? It's like instrumentalized. It's been turned into a vehicle for promoting ideology rather than a meritocratic like school of art where the goal is to promote great pieces of work. It's turned into like a propaganda factory, and which is why a lot of people, have been demoralized by the common, nexuses of culture. So what have people done in response? They have gone to decentralized hubs of culture. And what is that? Social media. YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, blah, 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 blah. Because central culture, it has decayed. And at least in the past, algorithms have been somewhat impartial. Now, even those have begun to decay, or they decayed right after they got built, right? You look at Twitter with their algorithm kind of like shadow banning a bunch of people on the right and like boosting a bunch of people on the left. So, basically astroturfing political movements. But still, there's some level of meritocratic, selection, which is why it's done so much better than, common legacy culture. Now, you could say, oh, that's great. It's a great thing that that's happening. But the point of this video, or the reason I wanted to make it, was that I think that there's another issue behind that curtain. You'd think, oh yeah, well, the algorithmic culture is going to be great. It's going to, this is going to keep making things go better and better and better, whatever. I think that there's a significant problem with this type of culture. And I think, well, with the way that the algorithms have shifted over the last year or two, I think it's going down a bad route. And not because of, pushing politics. I think it's more subtle and nuanced. Now, compared to where our culture currently is, in a centralized manner, it's a lot better, but it's a different failure mode. So let's go into it. Old social media operated under a social contract with its creators, being, if you put in a lot of effort and you show consistency and you show dedication to a platform, you will grow an audience. And once you grow an audience, we will promote your content to your subscribers. So you don't need to reinvent the wheel every single day. You create a brand, and then you're just, you're going to be, you'll gain momentum. So the idea there was, your followers is correlated with your views, which allowed you to build an in-group. It's a similar thing to how radio stations play the same songs over and over. If I were to do that on social media today, how difficult would that be? To basically to be so ubiquitous that you see the same piece of work made by me, like, 10 times during the day, something like that. It's like, you'd have to be really, really good. But with radio stations, it's like they just do it. They don't care if you get bored with the music. They just keep, pushing it and pushing it and pushing it. But by doing that, it becomes like a common staple of the culture. So social media started as like kind of a compromise between central, culture dissipators and pure algorithmic content. You got to select for yourself who you liked and curate a feed. And that feed promoted to you the same people. So you could continue to be a part of those internet subcultures. Now, what that led to was a complete destruction of common culture. Instead of there being one set of songs that most people listen to with, some things on the fringe, there's now like hundreds of genres with hundreds of different cultures and thousands and thousands or maybe even millions of tiny little internet culture groups that are completely fragmented and atomized and not connected to anybody else. But the other problem with that is that it's all on the internet. It's all digital. There's no real common way for people to bring the digital into the real world. Now, there's some examples of that, right? With like YouTube conventions and, some people hold real life meetups and stuff, but for the most part, like 99% of the culture of the internet is completely digital. So algorithmic culture destroys common culture. It destroys people to be able to connect with each other with, the same language. Now, the next step of where we're going and what has been like a more recent shift is taking algorithmic culture and cranking the knob to 100. Like the previous one was, there was a social contract between creators and people could kind of generate their own, curate their own feeds. But now the algorithms have gotten so good that people are really no longer being completely shown the content from the people they follow. They are not shown the things curated for them, by their own choice. It's something curated for them by the algorithm. And what is this algorithm? It's like the, how would you say it? It's like what motivates a lot of, billionaires or, people who have a vested interest in the economy. They care about the GDP, but the algorithm, all it cares about is how long you watch, how long you have your face glued to your phone scrolling. Why is that? Because it increases the likelihood you're going to see advertisements, right? And advertisers pay these companies so that, more people can buy their products. So basically, the more time you spend, the more products people will buy and the more money these companies make. But it's at the expense of everything else. So basically, these companies have ripped up the social contract with creators who are generating these digital hubs of community that are imperfect, but still communities. at the expense of optimizing another variable. What variable is that? Watch time. How long are you on the platform? And what does that look like? It looks like every single person you scroll by being someone completely new. You see a new face, a new face, a new face, a new face, a new face. Like you don't remember anyone you scroll by. There is no kind of common. There isn't a common pool of brands that you can watch. You don't get to see people's stories unfold for the most part. You just see a stream of, colors and weird stories and that seeks to maximize your novelty seeking. Because human beings are information consuming creatures. And why is that? We're trying to get more information about the real world. We want to learn lessons that increase our likelihood of surviving or making a lot of money or this or that or blah, blah, blah. So people really enjoy learning things and hijacking that with like a slot machine algorithm that just like constantly shows you novelty. Well, that's where companies are currently pushing. Now, I don't think we're completely there yet. Different subcultures have, are being promoted, right? So you still kind of know the certain people in your niche. But I think that the way the algorithms are going is they want to make your feed just like a blur of disconnected things. And maybe they don't want that, but that's kind of how it will pan out. Which means, maybe creators no longer care much to make stuff, which that could be a failure mode. But what it means is basically the death of internet communities or an increasing atomization of those communities. And I think that this isn't going to be like a long-term problem. Like you have to understand, social media is something that we haven't had for very long. And I mean, even Zuckerberg, when he was building Facebook, he didn't really know what he was making. He was like, he built something and then he just unleashed it on the world. And we are slowly figuring out what all that actually is. And we're also figuring out how to make the digital system, good for people, right? Because I think a bad outcome is if everyone is just staying at home, consuming content, making ad dollars for these companies, and just disconnected from everybody else. I mean, that seems like the bad outcome. The good outcome would be there's some common culture, that you can connect to other people with, but there's also something that brings the digital into the real world in terms of something you can actually participate in. And I don't think we figured out how to do that yet, but I think it will be important. Now, let's go to another element to this. I think pure algorithmic culture won't just kind of flatten over all the all the creator brands. I think you are still going to be seeing certain creator brands, but it's going to homogenize them. It's going to make, only certain types of creator brands like float to the top, like the Mr. Beasts and whatnot. Why is that? Because these people have cracked the code. They know how to make very compelling content. And why is that? Because they're optimizing to the algorithm. And what is the algorithm? It's just, it's a system that is like jacked into our, id. It's a system that has jacked into like our reptile brain and makes content that is like completely unconscious, that, leverages kind of different emotions to keep us on the app as long as possible. It's like food science. Like a lot of candies and foods are designed to taste good, but also not satisfy you. Like they're designed with like a certain ratio of sweet and saltiness and whatnot, so that you eat it and it's like, oh, it tastes good, but then there's a weird like trail on it. It feels like, okay, well, I need another one because I'm not completely satisfied. I need another one, so I'm not completely satisfied. Until, you've eaten like an entire bag of chips or an entire thing of candy or something like that. And I think certain people who are more, who are less conscious, or like because I think some people are like hyper conscious and some people are running on autopilot mostly. I think the people who run on autopilot, they get like one-shotted by a lot of these kind of manipulative tactics, which is why some people just like balloon up with when exposed to modern foods, because it's designed to attack those base instincts. It's completely optimized toward it. Same thing with algorithmic content, because everyone has an element of like this unconscious mind that's controlling them. Just some people are more of a slave to that than others. And I don't know. It just one-shots people. Now, like the thing is, because like Mr. Beast would say something like, instead of talking about the algorithm, you should talk about your audience. What does your audience want? Like, because some people say, oh, the algorithm didn't like my content. The algorithm didn't like my content. No, it's people didn't like your content. I would disagree. Because people are not this homogenous thing. They're not just a blob of, they like something, they don't like something. That's a simplistic way to view how people interact with the world. A better view is that there is the unconscious part and there's the conscious part, right? There's high effort content and there's low effort content. You can put someone into like a higher state of vibration, a higher state of thought, of consciousness, or a lower state. And the people in the current algorithm economy, they're very good at making low vibration state stuff. They're very good at making things that feel good for you. It feels like I'm learning. It feels like I'm doing something, but you're really not. So that's my counter to Mr. Beast. It's popcorn. It's a popcorn slop economy. So what does that do? Well, number one, you have the atomization of people. You also have, wasting billions of hours of people's time for nothing. Like, what are you doing? You're doing nothing. And there's no like, so what? You don't really, sometimes you learn stuff, but it's like little factoids. There's not really a deep so what from a lot of this stuff. Just pure entertainment. And you don't even get a cultural commonality from that. Like old TV shows, they might have been stupid, but you at least could bond with other people and maintain a countrywide culture because people watch the same thing and could talk to that using the same language, right? But algorithms, well, what do you get? You get 6, 7. Okay, that's, you get a meme, right? The thing is, memes were better in the past. Today, it's just like, okay, you said a phrase. That's not what these were. Like memes in the past were like there was a lot more to them. And it was more of like an inside joke thing. It was like people were in the culture. But now it's just like, oh, the funny phrase. It's like, but there's no connection to anything else. So what's really the issue here? You could say, oh, well, you're complaining a lot, but what's the actual problem? The problem is that culture requires a more nuanced system to operate. Why did we have centralized radio stations promoting music culture? Is it because, some insidious people made the radio stations? No, it's because it's a good system. Why do we have centralized universities? Why do we have, museum curators? People who decide what things to put up. It's because centralized organization in terms of the culture is actually a good thing. Why is that? Because people suck at making decisions. If you look at most art that people make, it's terrible. It's atrocious. It's horrible. I mean, I hate to say this. Well, I don't know. This might just be a quirk of how I am, but I don't know. I think there's like 2 occasions where I'm probably a terrible person because of this, but where like a girl showed me like some art that she made, and I just like stopped, like broke things off because it's like I don't know, if I'm starting a family with a girl, I want her aesthetic sensibilities to be good. I don't like if I read some like really bad poetry and look at some like horrific, disgusting art, it's like, I'm not going to pretend that that's good. I'm not going to pretend that, oh yeah, that's a good thing that you made. It's like, no, that's like, I don't want to start a life with somebody who, where that came out of their brain. Like that tells me a lot about like the state of your soul, the state of how you view the world. And if it's like some maggot infested corpse, it's like, where there's like blood on, like, it's like, what are you doing? It's like, does it mean that, you can't go there sometimes? No, it just means like, I don't know, aesthetics matter. Why did I go down that? Why did I say that? Because I'm trying to say, I genuinely believe aesthetics are extremely important. Number 1. Number 2, good taste is rare. Good taste is a high-class thing. It's something that you don't just get. Most people have terrible taste. Walk around a little bit. Look at the fashion that people wear. They wear a graphic tee with like, polyester shorts and flip-flops. They wear, a Minecraft creeper hoodie, or like, I don't know, just look around. It's like, did you think at all about the fashion of, that you're wearing? Look at the state of how our cars look. Look at look at like home renovations. You've probably seen a lot of these where it's like there's like an old classic, renovation where, there's like hand carved wood, this and that, and then some millennial couple goes in and they put in gray wood floors and like white walls and everything's all modern, and it's like what did you do, bro? This is disgusting. What did you do? But there's so many examples of this. Like, look around, you'll see the artistic taste people have on the whole is garbage. It is terrible. Why is that? Because our current way of doing things is everyone gets to do whatever they want. It's like super democracy. It's like, everyone, I trust that everyone will be able to make the best decision possible for themselves. So any morality goes, any art goes, any lifestyle goes, anything goes. And you could say, oh, well, yeah, that's reasonable. That's true. It's like every single religion has said the exact opposite. Every single culture that has survived has said the exact opposite. Says, no, you don't get to do whatever you want. You need to take this, anarchistic will of yours and, maybe sacrifice the stupid parts of yourself. I want to go out and pillage and steal. No. If you do that, we don't have a society, right? Take those bad parts of yourself, do away with them, and, embody a better version of yourself for the good of others around you. That's the better move. Not, anything goes, anything you want to do is fine. Like, that's stupidity. That's how a civilization ends. But that's our current culture. And the way it has reverberated through our aesthetics is everything is ugly. So what's the alternative? What's the alternative? Oh, I hear a lot of complaining. What do you... The alternative is central control. With a caveat. The people who promote things in culture need to have impeccable taste. And they need to be meritocratic. And you could say, the algorithm does this already. The algorithm does it already. And I would say, sure, it tries to. But let's go back a bit. What's the best type of algorithm that currently exists? On a simple level. I'd say it's a large language model. A large language model pretends to be a human being in terms of reasoning and language and whatnot. It embodies the latent intelligence in, the entire human corpus. But ask it to create like a good poem. It's going to sound like a poem, but is it like anything special? No. Ask it to create a joke. Ask it. It's terrible at it. I've tried. When these first came out, I was like, oh man, are these going to replace my ability to like write punchlines? Even though I'm not good at writing punchlines, I was thinking, well, shoot, maybe AI comics are going to be better than mine. But like every single time without fail that I've tried to make a punchline with an AI, it's like, it sucked. It does not know how to do humor. And like humor is like the quintessence of like, I would say humor is the quintessence of like great poetry, because you can't fake it, right? You can fake something sounding deep and philosophical, but you can't fake humor because you either laugh or you don't. And AI can't do it. It's too smart for it. It's too human for it. And so that's the best thing we got. But AI, algorithms in general, they miss a fundamental qualia. They don't have soul. They don't observe. They don't see something for what it is. Only human beings can do that. And because human beings can be conscious judges of things in the real world, we can make accurate, decisions about things. We can decide something. We can decide if something is good or bad. We can put it into a category. We can say this is aesthetically pleasing. This is stupid. Can an AI do that? It can guess based on what's been written previously, but it can't do that from scratch. And we could go more into how AIs work or whatever, but it's like, with our current algorithms, we are not getting AGI. You could maybe have something that simulates AGI with like some weird AI system. And I'm thinking about like how you'd actually do that, and I have an idea. But people who ascribe some sort of qualia or will or consciousness to AI are falling for marketing propaganda. They don't actually see how this stuff works. And I would say that the beliefs and assumptions they have going into what consciousness actually is are completely flawed. But because human beings have a special sauce that is different than algorithms, because they can actually judge accurately, right? Because they can actually see the painting rather than, doing some sort of predictive, neural net, input-output response. Human judges, human curators are better than algorithms. And that's why radio stations produced the music of the 80s. They created incentive structures to create brilliant music, brilliant movies, whatnot. The problem is they've been corrupted for the reasons I mentioned before. Now people are going towards pure algorithmic things. But I think that those are very flawed as well. Like, for a while, I listened to the stuff that I, listened to on Spotify. But the problem is, it's a lonely thing. If you are listening to only the music that you want to listen to, you reject all of humanity. You want to stay in your own little bubble. You want to stay in your own little pleasure pod where every whim and desire of yours is instantly gratified, rather than playing a part in culture as a whole, a culture you share with other people. So every time I drive in my car, I'm now listening to radio, and a lot of the stuff sucks, and it kind of pisses me off when I see astroturfed things. But I also say, you know what? There's still some value in it. Maybe the music artist here, they sold their soul to the devil to get played this much. But you know what? It may be Faustian, but at least there's a common culture that's emerging from it. And because of that, it uplifts certain, maybe something that could be mediocre and turns it into a cultural staple. And I would also say this. Algorithmic culture is a culture of inequality. What is inequality? It means that some people, a small subset have all the views, all the wealth, everything else, blah, blah, blah. And everyone else has very little. That's the way our economy has been going, but algorithmic culture does the same thing. The people who are the best at playing the game, or the people who focus all of their effort on just making algorithmic content without being fully well-rounded individuals, They win. But everyone else loses. But the problem is, that's not how you get innovation. If you look at, in America, how we innovated in the past, like who built Bell Labs? Bell Labs and AT&T, that's what created our modern world. Bell Labs, AT&T, Texas Instruments. The founding engineers of those companies, the people who built the biggest advancements in all of human history were like, some random, townsperson from some town in Arkansas or Nebraska, right? But the system was able to find gems, and, make the most out of them. In order to have a working system, like a good culture, it needs to be open to synchronicity. It needs to be open to serendipity, right? It needs to be open to, something not being exactly perfect. Something being a little unpolished. Something being not perfectly written. Something that, is it takes a little bit of effort to read, right? But there's value in it. But it's something new. It's something important, right? Like a good book. It's something that you don't just passively consume as a reptile brain, id-possessed person. It's something that you are actively participating in, that you work with, that you're reading or you're interacting with. A good system doesn't just say the only winners are these people, these like 3 people at the top. A good system says, we need to carve out a space for like a lot of people to win. And I think the old internet way of, having a bunch of these communities is, probably something that we should implement in future versions of our, cultural nexuses. But you also need, at the same time, some sort of central human decision makers that say, what is actually good art? What actually matters? You can't have algorithms just say, this is good art, this is bad art. Like let's look at Chinese civilization. Chinese civilization is probably, one of the most efficient types of states that have ever existed. And it was all based on the civil service exam. How well do you memorize our poetry? How well do you do math? And blah, 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 blah. The problem is, even though Chinese civilization was super stable, it's like the only civilization that has lasted like thousands of years, right? Through dynastic collapses and rebirths and up and down and blah, blah, blah. Very stable, but still, they stepped on all of their innovations, right? The treasure ships, they burned them. They had gunpowder. They had, magnetic compasses. They had a bunch of like crazy inventions, but they never really used them. And their entire society was algorithmic, right? It was, can you pass the exam? Now, algorithms, they're good, but they only get us so far. You need a better hybrid, I would say. I think the next phase of human culture needs to implement, it needs to implement something maybe counterintuitive that takes from the best of all these things. And it's good because we have a lot of history to help guide us. But there's a value to curators. There's a value to multiple different tribes. There's a value to central culture. But as we've seen historically, a lot of these things can be corrupted. And there are weird failure modes of all these things. And it could be the case that there's just no solution here. You know, it could be the case where, you know, maybe the only solution is no mass market culture. Everything is a local culture. But I don't think that's possible. There's a lot of value that comes from a mass market type of culture, you know, a common countrywide culture. And the apparatuses that make that possible. But it really depends on how we build it. I think every new iteration that we do build of a system that helps us build, like make this stuff work, is going to have problems with it, because I don't think there's no real perfect system. But at the end of the day, what I'm calling for is, if you're a builder, if you're a developer, you know, if you run some company that has an effect on our culture, think deeply about what you're actually doing. Because you guys are building the next culture. You're building the next way that human beings network with each other. And you could say, well, I got to prioritize the survival of my company. I don't think that's... You shouldn't kind of look at things just in that lens. Because what you're doing is well beyond your company. It's, you know, you're governing the lives of millions of people. And if you set up your system wrong, not only are you hurting millions of people, you could be setting human civilization back and like stunting our growth as a species. And my concern is that I think everywhere I turn, I think the people creating these systems are very bad at it, because they refuse to look at fundamentally what they're doing. They refuse to acknowledge, you know, that their products are meant to enhance people's lives, are meant to, you know, be a part of the human community rather than some labor and value extraction mechanism. You know, social media, all of social media is like this. Dating apps are like this. Google search is like this. Like sponsored results, SEO optimization, and you look up what the CEOs said about this. Like they basically said, we're going to, you know, prioritize, you know, getting money over the accuracy of our search results. That's paraphrasing, but that's what the CEO has said. It could just be the case that, as Oswald Spengler said, we're at the end of our civilization, that this is the fall of Rome, that it's over. And maybe that's why all of these vultures are swarming and pecking at the bones of the civilizational corpse we inhabit. Maybe moral decay is just a symptom of that. Or maybe it doesn't need to be this way. Maybe a lot of this is a choice. You know, like in the Old Testament, you constantly see the Israelites. There's a bad generation, and then there's another bad generation, and then terrible things happen, and then there's a good generation, and then there's a bad generation and a good generation. Or there's a bad king, a good king, and a bad king, and a good king. Like, and a lot of the times in the Old Testament, you see like the Israelites like completely forgot about they forgot about the Torah. They forgot about the word of God, you know. And a king like goes and he finds like the scrolls. He's like, what? It's funny in the Bible. The kings in the Old Testament find the Bible, and it like literally it's like a self-referential thing. So the king finds the Bible. He starts reading it. He says, "We were supposed to follow all these laws. Oh my gosh, we haven't been doing that." And then he like the king like institutes like this order. He says we gotta cut down the like basically like totem poles. Like there are like these totem poles in like ancient Israel, which was weird. Like they had like these wooden carvings that people worshipped. So he said he cuts down like the idols, right? The wooden idols, the wooden poles. You know, literally totem poles. Cuts down the totem poles, cuts down the like these pagan altars, and destroys the pagan altars, and then starts instituting sacrifices. What is a sacrifice, right? We think, oh, it's this barbaric old practice, but what is it? They were taking labor, you know, the effort they put into, you know, raising livestock, which is not trivial, right? The energy they put into that, and saying, we are going to sacrifice some of that energy to God, right? To a higher ideal, you know. So you're willing to put in the effort, and everything isn't about optimizing one stupid variable like GDP or viewer watch time, right? It's not about, you know, cleaning out every little bit of value at the expense of everything else. What the sacrifices were in the Old Testament were saying, we don't need to be super, you know, penny pinching, you know, like extremists for like value. We are willing to sacrifice value for a higher ideal. And we need to look back on that. That is a good way of living. And do you see that? Do you see that standard implemented in our civilization? Do you see our leaders promoting that? No. As I've mentioned many times in this talk, our leaders do the exact opposite. And I would say that's probably why we find ourselves in the state we are currently in. So, just like the old kings of the past, maybe we simply find ourselves in a bad generation. Maybe it's not the end of Western civilization. You know, things suck. We could be close to it, close to the end, right? Population is collapsing. Things do suck. But I think a better view of looking at it is we have a brilliant opportunity here. At worst, in the worst case scenario, we can create a parallel society. We can create a parallel culture, a parallel way of doing things. While everyone wallows in their slop and their filth and their stupid algorithmic culture and their stupid central culture, why don't we just implement things the way they should be implemented, you know? And even if you have a couple people in it, right, it's just a matter of getting the ball rolling, getting the network effect to slowly build it up. You know, and it could just be a matter of, you know, taking old institutions and converting them to something better. But I don't know. I don't really have the solution. All I have to say is we need to return to better principles. You know, a better North Star than what we currently have. Like, you can't flatten over the entire human experience and reduce it to one variable, which is what most of our economic systems have done. And it's not just billionaires, it's these giant corporate systems which act like entities, right? Like a corporation wants to survive. It reacts to its environment. It has inputs and outputs. A corporation is like a living organism. Corporations are literally like artificial intelligences. Same thing is with governments. They act as like these entities that do things. And, either it's people who have corrupted views of life, or it's these misaligned AIs, these misaligned corporations or misaligned governments. And I would say even you have misaligned crowds, right? Some people are possessed by ideologies. Some people are possessed by ideologies where they think it's themselves, but you're not talking to a person with many people today. You're talking with a giant mimetic entity. You're talking with like a mind virus or an ideology. And an ideology is another type of AI. It's a like this idea system that, controls a bunch of people and operates through a bunch of people to do things in the real world. Why? To self-propagate itself. Right? And Dawkins talks about this, Richard Dawkins. People aren't the only players today. There are interesting monsters that exist. And, maybe we got to wrangle those monsters into submission for the good of humanity. Or maybe we just need to convince some leaders, to be better people. Or maybe we need to come up with a parallel civilization. Or just create a better alternative. Or maybe it's just over and Spengler was right. And the West is going to be obliterated, just as Rome was, or Babylon. But who knows? Who knows? I think all we can do is be the best individuals we can be. Do what we can. Do what you can with the information you have, with the tools in front of you. And don't run from power. Because there are these types of psychopaths. There are these types of automaton people who don't obey any principles. Their principle is to get more power. And what are they willing to do? They live by a Faustian bargain. They say, I'm willing to do whatever an organization tells me as long as it gives me more power. So corporations are run by tons of people like this who honestly act very soullessly because they are just really good nodes. Whatever the corporation believes, they believe. They're going to do exactly what is told to them, regardless of if it's moral or immoral. That's the baseline. That's the normal person to get power. And the problem is most people who should be in power, most people who should be making these decisions, who should be leading, they are cowards. They say, I don't want to lead. I don't want to lead because that's something bad guys do. The bad guys want power. The bad guys, climb the ranks and try and do stuff like that. Okay, then the bad guys are going to have power, and the bad guys are going to have power over you. You guys got to stop listening to Hollywood morality of just be nice, just be the good guy. It's like the good guy that's been taught to you is an image of a passive cow that does nothing, that will institute no change. And why do you think that that idea has been, pushed so hard? Just like I said before, there is an economically, useful reason to propagate that mimetic idea, right? If you're more conscious, if you're less of an automaton, do they want you rocking the boat? Does a corporation want you changing its general direction of GDP maximization? Because you care about humanity? No. A corporation wants to do what it wants to do. It wants to crush individuals. It wants people to have no freedom, have no ability to self-actualize and do things. It wants people to be, really good nodes who have very consistent inputs and outputs. That's what a corporation or a system or an unaligned AI wants people to be. Is that a good human life? No. But that's what they want. And, so there's you look at any movie, lots of movies are like this. It's like, we can't be like the bad guy. We gotta do the right thing. But it's like, it's not actually the right thing. It's, it's an astroturfed pretend version of that. But you guys have probably already seen all that stuff, and it's just like, you need to be very aware of what you believe. Because you can say that you believe all this stuff, right? You can say that you see how things work. But unless you actually act on it, if you have some political convictions and you just say, oh yeah, well I'm based, I have all these political convictions, and you just don't do anything, you just sit on your butt and you scroll, that's exactly what they want from you. They want you to not seek power. They want you to do nothing. They want you to be passive. They want you to consume because it's great for the GDP. Which isn't to say wealth and prosperity is a bad thing, that it shouldn't be something that we consider, but it's like, that's not everything. And realize that what you say you believe and what you act out in the real world, are very different. It's called stated versus revealed preferences, right? You can say one thing, but I would say, and you could say, I this doesn't concern me. It's like, no, it does. Because you are not just your conscious mind. You are also your lizard brain. You're your unconscious mind, which is far more of who you are than what you just consciously think. You don't know who you are. You might think you do, but you don't. And who you actually are could be a lot more of a weakling, could be a lot worse, could be less aligned than you think, which is why it's extremely important that you consciously reflect on who you are. Reflect not only on who you are, but what you do in the real world. Are you doing what you can do? And you'll probably find out, no, I am falling short somehow. Which just means you got to take your consciousness and do what consciousness does best, which is make decisions, enforce will. So stop living unconsciously. Stop being a slave to these larger systems. Start taking power. Start wrangling control away from these, mimetic viruses that live in your brain, number one, so that you can actually control yourself. You can actually direct your life and your will and all of your energy towards something good, number one. And once you have that, then you can start wrangling control away from the forces of corruption that currently have a stranglehold on our society, on our culture, on our systems. That's the way to do it. That's the only thing we can do. So start with yourself, take the beam from your own eye, and then start operating in the real world. And don't be a perfectionist either. Don't be like, oh, I gotta be perfect. It's like, no one's perfect. Just do what you can, do good enough, and then start working. Because if we don't start doing things, if we don't start fixing things, I don't know. We've lived through a very peaceful time where we go to bed with our stomachs full, with our teeth brushed, with clean clothes and clean sheets, and in air-conditioned houses. But that's not the norm. The norm is starvation, war, dirt and grime. The norm in human history is hell. And things suck right now, but they can get a lot worse. And it's up to you and I to make sure that doesn't happen. Because for several generations at least, they've been willing to cut corners. They've been willing to sacrifice what it means to be human. They've been willing to sacrifice the good of humanity, the good of individuals, right? On the altar of, these false gods of, GDP, money, attention, with no regard for what that actually will do to people. And we're just beginning to see the effects of that. Of mass social engineering, of mass population engineering projects, like on every level. So, you only got one life. And you only got one life. And playing it safe and playing it perfect is going to, lead you nowhere fast. Now is the time, if you're going to live in any time in human history, now is a great time to be living. Because what you are doing in this time period matters, I think, a lot more than in most other time periods in history. And I think that if we fail, if we don't do what is required of us, we could probably see thousands of years of human stagnation. We could see nuclear war. We could see the entire world look like the failed state of Brazil. We could see a reversion on human progress where we forget things, where starvation now becomes common, where disease starts taking us out. We could see a society where people are barely conscious anymore, where they are jacked into a digital world that serves no purpose except for the production of their dopamine. A lot of these things you'd think are sci-fi. Oh, that could never happen. But read history. When things get bad, they get really bad. They can get very, very bad. I mean, just look at what Lenin did. I mean, That's a fun time. So I don't know. Don't get comfortable. Don't get comfortable. Get a little uncomfortable. Stop playing those video games. And I don't know. Do something, because people are counting on you. And you'd be surprised. You'd be shocked if you just made yourself uncomfortable, if you just took a little bit of a risk, how much good you could do to the world. You know, if you just put in the time, if you put in a couple of years of effort on something, you know, God is going to reward you. And he's going to reward other people because of the sacrifices you put in. You know, and that's what we're here to do. We're here to create things. We're here to build, you know, to set things right. So, I don't know. Fulfill your potential. That's all I got to say. But I hope you guys enjoy. Let me know what else we should talk about. Yeah. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.